The Dancing Plague of 1518. History isn't always shaped by emperors or armies. Sometimes, it's shaped by bodies that refuse to stop moving. July 1518. Strasbourg. The air is thick. The streets shimmer with heat. A woman steps outside her home. Her name is Frau Trophia, and without music, without reason, she starts to dance. Not gracefully, not happily. This is frantic, violent, desperate. Her feet pound the stone as if something inside her is pulling the strings. Her husband pleads with her to stop. She can't. Hours pass, then days. For nearly a week, her body keeps moving. Her face drains of color. Her limbs jerk in sharp, unnatural spasms. And then something terrifying happens. She's no longer alone. Within days, dozens of people begin dancing too. Neighbors, strangers, entire families. By August, more than 400 bodies convulse through the streets of Strasbourg. The city authorities panic. But their medical answer is disastrously wrong. They blame hot blood. And their cure? More dancing. Guild halls are cleared. A wooden stage is built in the grain market. Musicians are hired to keep the rhythm going. It's like pouring fuel on a fire. The music legitimizes the madness. More people join. The crowd grows. But this isn't celebration. It's a slow-motion collapse. Shoes fall apart. Feet bleed. People drop from dehydration and starvation because they physically cannot stop. Some die mid-step. Heart attacks. Strokes. Up to 15 deaths a day. Picture it. Hundreds of bodies twitching and spasming under the summer sun. Eyes empty. Sweat-soaked clothing clinging to shaking frames. Loved ones watch. Officials stand frozen. This isn't joy. It's a siege. For centuries, historians called it mass hysteria. A population crushed by famine, disease, and despair, finally snapping under unbearable stress. A psychological contagion, spreading fear through motion. But there's another explanation. One far more chilling. Ergot, a fungus that grows on damp rye, the staple grain of the region. When consumed, it releases powerful alkaloids that attack the nervous system. One form causes violent muscle spasms, uncontrollable convulsions, a grotesque imitation of dance. Another compound is chemically related to LSD, which means these people may not just have been moving. They may have been hallucinating, trapped in weeks of terror, minds unraveling while their bodies were forced to perform. If that's true, this wasn't madness. It wasn't hysteria. It was poisoning. A microscopic organism hijacked an entire city, turning ordinary people into unwilling performers in history's most horrifying dance. And if something so small could do that once, how sure are we it couldn't happen again? The Great Emu War. In 1932, the Australian government did something almost impossible to believe. It declared war on birds. And it lost. This isn't folklore. It's official history. After World War I, thousands of Australian veterans were given farmland in Western Australia. The idea was simple. Start fresh. Grow wheat. Build a future. But the land was harsh. The soil was poor. The Great Depression was tightening its grip. And then the emus arrived. 20,000 of them. Tall. Fast. Flightless. Marching inland after breeding season. They found the wheat fields and treated them like an open buffet. They trampled crops. Smashed fences. Let rabbits pour in behind them. The farmers were desperate. Many were former soldiers. So they asked the government for military help. Actual weapons. And unbelievably, the request was approved. The Minister of Defense reasoned that this would be good training for the army. Target practice. Against birds. The military arrived with 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. On paper, it was absurdly one-sided. Trained soldiers. Automatic weapons. Versus emus. It should have been over in minutes. Instead, it turned into a disaster. The first ambush failed when the birds stayed out of range. Later, a massive flock, nearly 1,000 strong, came into view. The guns opened fire. And almost nothing happened. The Lewis guns were designed for trenches, not fast-moving chaos. The emus scattered instantly, dodging, sprinting, disappearing. Hundreds of bullets later, barely a dozen birds were down. One soldier later admitted the emus had a strategy. Scatter instantly. Regroup elsewhere. Then came the military's most humiliating idea. Mount the machine gun on a truck. Chase them down. The plan collapsed immediately. The truck bounced violently across the terrain. The gunner couldn't aim. And the emus, capable of running over 30 miles per hour, simply outran them. Not a single clean shot. Fuel burned. Ammo wasted. 0 birds killed. Even the commanding officer sounded impressed. He reported that emu groups had lookout leaders. Tall birds standing watch while others fed. Warning calls at the first hint of danger. Some emus were hit and kept running anyway. Soldiers joked they had armor like tanks. After a week, the numbers were brutal. Thousands of rounds fired. Fewer than 100 emus killed. Then the press found out. Newspapers mocked the operation mercilessly. The emus became folk heroes. A member of parliament even joked about awarding medals to the birds. The government had had enough. The military withdrew. The guns were packed up. The war was over. The emus stayed. The wheat disappeared. And history recorded a strange, humbling truth. Sometimes, the most embarrassing defeat doesn't come from an enemy with weapons, but from one with feathers. And if an army can lose to birds, what other impossible moments are hiding in our past? The Tanganyika laughter epidemic. Laughter is supposed to heal. It's meant to be contagious in a good way. But in 1962, in East Africa, laughter became a medical mystery. Not joy, not humor, an illness. January 30th, 1962. A quiet mission-run girls' boarding school in the village of Kashasha. 3 students begin to laugh. Soft at first, then louder. And they can't stop. Minutes stretch into hours. Hours into days. The laughter spreads. Not like a joke, like a seizure. Within weeks, 95 out of 159 students are affected. Laughing, crying, gasping for breath. Some collapse from exhaustion. The episodes are relentless, painful, paralyzing. Classes become impossible. Sleep is disrupted. Fear takes over. By March 18th, the school shuts down. But closing the doors doesn't end it. It unleashes it. The girls return home, and the laughter follows them. In the village of Nshamba, families begin to fall ill. Neighbors, relatives, friends. Within 2 months, over 200 people are affected. The pattern is unmistakable. Uncontrolled laughter mixed with crying. Restlessness, panic, agitation. Some episodes last hours. Others last weeks. No fever, no infection, no physical cause anyone can find. Fear spreads faster than answers. Was it poison? A curse? Something in the water? Schools across the region shut down as a precaution. When the original school tries to reopen in May, the laughter erupts again. It closes permanently. Then it jumps to another school. Dozens more students affected. By the end, more than 1,000 people are touched by the epidemic. 14 schools close their doors. And then, after 18 months, it simply fades away. No cure. No explanation. Today, the leading theory is mass psychogenic illness. A psychological contagion triggered by extreme stress. Because timing matters. This was Tanganyika's first year of independence. A nation reborn and deeply uncertain. These students weren't just schoolgirls. They were young women under crushing expectations. Rigid discipline. Foreign education systems. A future filled with pressure and unknowns. Stress had nowhere to go. So it came out as laughter. Not happiness. Release. Once it started, the closed social environment amplified it. Seeing friends lose control made others vulnerable. A feedback loop of tension and imitation. The laughter wasn't the disease. It was the symptom. The sound of a society carrying more anxiety than it could safely hold. And if stress can spread that powerfully, what other invisible forces might be shaping human behavior without us even realizing it? The War of the Oaken Bucket. Wars are usually fought for power, for land, for faith. But in 1325, northern Italy went to war over a bucket. A plain wooden bucket. Nothing fancy. No jewels. No gold. Just wood. The rivals were Medina and Bologna, and they already hated each other. For centuries, these neighboring city-states had been locked in a bitter feud. They stood on opposite sides of a larger Italian power struggle, one loyal to the Pope, the other to the Holy Roman Emperor. Different politics, Different loyalties. Same border. Raids were common. Livestock stolen. Territories violated. Tension simmered. Then someone decided to escalate things in the pettiest way imaginable. A small group of Modenese soldiers slipped into Bologna under cover of darkness. They went straight to the city's main well and stole the bucket, not as a necessity, as a message, a medieval prank, a calculated insult. Bologna was humiliated. Furious, they demanded the bucket back. Modena refused. So Bologna declared war. The bucket wasn't really the cause. It was the excuse. The final spark in decades of resentment. But officially, this was about the bucket. Bologna mobilized an army of 32,000 men, an enormous force for the time. Modena could barely gather 7,000. The two armies met at Zappolino. For 2 hours, the battlefield turned into chaos. Steel clashed. Horses thundered. Against all odds, Modena held. Better leadership. Stronger cavalry. Then the impossible happened. Bologna's army broke. Panicked. Fled. Modenese forces chased them all the way back to Bologna's gates. And then came the humiliation. Modena didn't besiege the city. They didn't conquer it. They camped outside the walls. For days. Mocking their defeated rivals. Before leaving, they stole another bucket. The cost was staggering. Around 2,000 soldiers dead. On both sides. All for a wooden bucket. And here's the twist. Modena never gave it back. They still have it today, hanging inside the bell tower of Modena's cathedral. A 700-year-old trophy. A permanent reminder of the war fought over household equipment. The rivalry didn't end. The fighting continued for years. But history gained one unforgettable lesson. When pride takes over, even the smallest insult can turn deadly. And if a bucket can start a war, what trivial disputes today might be more dangerous than they seem? The Boston Molasses Flood, January 15, 1919. Boston. Just after noon, the North End was hit by something no one could have imagined. Not a fire, not an explosion. A wave of molasses, 25 feet high, moving faster than a speeding car. At 529 Commercial Street stood a massive steel tank, 5 stories tall, 90 feet wide. Inside it, more than 2.3 million gallons of molasses. It belonged to the Purity Distilling Company. The molasses was destined for industrial alcohol, a key ingredient in wartime munitions. Demand was high. Deadlines were tight. Corners were cut. Neighbors had warned something was wrong. The tank groaned when it was filled. It shuddered. It leaked constantly, so much that children collected the sweet drips in cups. The company's solution wasn't to fix it. They painted the tank brown to hide the leaks. Then, on an unusually warm winter day, it failed. With a sound like rapid gunfire, the steel rivets blew out. The tank split open, and the city drowned in sugar. A tidal wave of thick, boiling molasses exploded outward. It crushed buildings, swept them off their foundations. The force bent steel beams, knocked an elevated train off its tracks. The flood weighed over 13,000 tons. Nothing could stop it, but the real horror came seconds later. People were trapped, crushed, or pulled under and suffocated. Molasses filled lungs. Rescue became impossible. Horses from nearby stables were swallowed where they stood. As the air cooled, the molasses thickened, turning streets into a deadly glue trap. Rescuers waded through waist-deep sludge. Boots were ripped off their feet. Movement slowed to a crawl. The air was sickeningly sweet. The ground treacherous. Screams echoed between shattered buildings. By the end, 21 people were dead. More than 150 were injured. Cleaning it up took months. 87,000 man-hours. Firefighters sprayed salt water from the harbor, coating the entire neighborhood in a sticky brown film. For decades afterward, locals swore that on hot summer days, you could still smell molasses in the air. The disaster sparked one of the first major class action lawsuits in U.S. history. Families sued the company responsible. The defense claimed sabotage. Anarchists. Anything but responsibility. The investigation told a different story. The tank was poorly built, never properly tested, constantly weakened by internal fermentation. The company was found fully liable. They paid millions in modern-day dollars. The flood wasn't just a bizarre tragedy. It was a turning point. a moment when corporate negligence became legally accountable, and it proved that even something sweet can become deadly when profit is placed above safety. The 1904 Olympic Marathon. The Olympic Games are meant to celebrate human excellence, strength, discipline, endurance. But in 1904, the marathon turned into something else entirely. A medical experiment, a survival trial, a complete disaster. St. Louis, August. Temperatures soaring past 90 degrees. The course? Dusty country roads, steep hills, 25 miles of punishment, and just 2 water stops. That wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. The race organizer believed dehydration was good training. He wanted to see what would happen if runners were denied water. What happened was chaos. 32 athletes started the race. Only 14 finished. Others collapsed, quit, or were physically destroyed by the conditions. The official winner was Thomas Hicks. But running is a generous word. His support team fed him a bizarre cocktail. Brandy and strychnine. Yes, rat poison. In small doses, it acts as a stimulant. In larger doses, it kills you. By the final miles, Hicks was hallucinating, barely conscious. His trainers held him upright and dragged him forward. His feet moved in a running motion while his body sagged. He crossed the finish line, won gold, then collapsed instantly. For doctors fought to keep him alive. But here's the twist. He wasn't even the first man to finish. That honor belonged to Fred Lors, an American who jogged into the stadium to roaring applause. The president's daughter stepped forward to crown him, until someone shouted the truth. Lors had cramped early, got into his manager's car, rode 11 miles. When the car broke down, he hopped out and ran the rest. He claimed it was a joke. He was banned for life, later forgiven. Others fared far worse. One runner collapsed with internal bleeding. The dust he inhaled had torn his stomach lining. He nearly died. Another vomited uncontrollably and withdrew. Then there was a Cuban mailman. No training, no money. He hitchhiked to the games, ran in street clothes, hadn't eaten in 40 hours. Mid-race, he stopped to eat apples from an orchard. They were rotten. He got stomach cramps, took a nap, and still finished fourth. 2 runners from South Africa, the first black Africans to compete in the Olympics, were chased nearly a mile off course by wild dogs. Despite that, one still finished in the top 10. The race was so disastrous that officials nearly removed the marathon from the Olympics forever. It wasn't athletic greatness. It was junk science, poor planning, and sheer, reckless determination. The 1904 marathon proved one thing beyond doubt. Human limits are impressive, but human decision-making? That might be the most dangerous obstacle of all. The Great Stink of London. In the summer of 1858, the most powerful city on earth was nearly defeated by a smell. Not a nuisance, not an inconvenience. A citywide assault on the senses. London reeked. For centuries, the River Thames had been treated as a dumping ground. Human waste, industrial runoff, slaughterhouse remains. All of it flowed straight into the water. For a long time, the river coped. But by the mid-19th century, London had exploded past 2 million residents. Flush toilets became common, and the Thames became something else entirely. A slow-moving, brown sewer. Then came the summer of 1858. Hot, dry, the river level dropped. Its banks exposed thick layers of black, rotting sludge. The heat baked it. What rose into the air was unforgettable. Hydrogen sulfide, methane, every foul odor imaginable combined into one suffocating cloud. People vomited in the streets. The smell crept into homes, shops, and hospitals. Even Parliament, sitting right on the riverbank, was not spared. At first, the government tried to ignore it. Curtains in the House of Commons were soaked in chemicals to mask the stench. It didn't work. The odor was so unbearable that officials debated abandoning Westminster altogether, moving the government out of London. But this wasn't just unpleasant. It was terrifying. At the time, disease was believed to spread through bad air. Cholera, typhoid. London feared the smell itself would trigger a mass plague. Panic set in. That's when a radical solution finally gained traction. A civil engineer proposed something unprecedented. A completely new sewer system for the entire city. The idea was simple in concept, staggering in scale. Intercept the waste. Divert it away from the Thames. Carry it downstream and release it safely into the sea. For years, politicians had refused to pay for it. Too expensive. Too ambitious. The Great Stink changed everything. With lawmakers literally holding handkerchiefs to their faces, funding was approved in just 18 days. What followed was an engineering masterpiece. Miles of massive underground brick tunnels. Thousands of connecting street sewers. The tunnels were egg-shaped to maximize flow and prevent clogs. Built with the strongest materials available. And the capacity? Designed for a population far larger than London had at the time. Then doubled. The system wasn't built for that moment. It was built for the future. More than a century later, it's still in use. The Great Stink forced London to confront a truth it could no longer ignore. Sometimes, progress doesn't come from vision. It comes from desperation. And sometimes, it takes hitting absolute rock bottom before a city finally learns how to clean itself up. The Battle for Castle Eder. May 5, 1945. Just 5 days after Hitler's suicide. 2 days before Germany's unconditional surrender. And yet, a battle still raged. But this wasn't a typical World War II fight. This was stranger than fiction. At Castle Eder, a medieval fortress perched on a hill in Austria, the lines of allegiance blurred. The Nazis had turned it into a high-security prison. Inside, French VIPs, former prime ministers, top generals, a tennis star, even the sister of Charles de Gaulle. As the Third Reich collapsed, the regular guards abandoned their posts. But danger remained. A fanatical unit of the SS, refusing to surrender, was moving to execute every prisoner. The prisoners sent a message to the Austrian resistance. The resistance contacted the Americans. Captain John Jack Lee, a decorated tank commander, answered the call. But he had only a handful of men and a single Sherman tank named Besotten Jenny. It wasn't enough. Then, an unexpected ally appeared. Major Isef Sepp Gongau, a German army officer loyal to the Wehrmacht, not the Nazis. He despised the SS. He had been secretly working with the Austrian resistance. Lee explained the situation. Gongau didn't hesitate. He brought 10 German soldiers to help defend the castle. What followed was extraordinary. A ragtag force of Americans, Germans, and French prisoners, some former soldiers themselves, prepared for battle. The Sherman tank was stationed at the main gate. Defenders took positions at windows and battlements. Enemies united by one cause: survival, decency, humanity. At dawn, the SS attacked. Machine guns, anti-tank rockets, an 88mm cannon. The Sherman tank was destroyed almost immediately, but it bought precious time. All day, they held the castle. French prisoners fired side by side with their German and American protectors. Edward Daladier, a former French prime minister, manned a machine gun from a window. Tragedy struck. Major Gongau, the German officer who had risked everything, was killed by an SS sniper while moving a French prisoner to safety. A hero dying to save former enemies. The defenders ran low on ammunition. The SS prepared for a final, overwhelming assault. Then salvation arrived. A relief force of American tanks broke through. The SS was routed. The battle was over. In the final days of a war defined by hatred and division, Castle Eder became a strange testament. Enemies became allies. Courage crossed borders. Shared humanity triumphed, even if only for a few hours. It was proof that even in the darkest conflicts, decency can unite the most unlikely of people. The Pig War. The United States. The British Empire. Two of the most powerful English-speaking nations on Earth. On the brink of war. Over a pig. The conflict centered on the San Juan Islands, a small archipelago between Vancouver Island and the North American mainland. A treaty in 1846 had set the border at the 49th parallel. But once it reached the water, confusion reigned. Which channel marked the official boundary? Both nations claimed the islands. Tensions simmered for years, largely ignored, until a potato-loving pig walked into history. On June 15th, an American farmer found a black pig devouring his crop. He shot it, then tried to settle with the British ranch manager. $10 offered. $100 demanded. Refused. Threats followed. The settlers feared British arrest on their soil. They called the U.S. military. Captain George Pickett answered. Yes, that George Pickett, later infamous for Pickett's charge at Gettysburg. He landed with 66 soldiers and claimed the island for America. The British responded with warships and over 2,000 troops, cannons and rifles at the ready. It should have ended in disaster. But cooler heads prevailed. Captain Geoffrey Hornby, in command of the British ships, refused to escalate. He awaited orders from Rear Admiral Robert Baines. Baines, appalled at the absurdity, famously said, "It would be foolish to involve two great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig." Diplomacy won. A joint military occupation was established. For 12 years, British and American troops lived peacefully on the island. They even socialized together for holidays and sporting events. Finally, in 1872, Kaiser Wilhelm III of Germany mediated the dispute. The islands went to the United States. A war averted. By a pig. The Year Without a Summer. 1816. A year of darkness. A global climate disaster that plunged the Northern Hemisphere into chaos. It began half a world away, on the Indonesian island of Sumbawa. April 1815. Mount Tambora erupted. Not a small eruption. The largest in recorded human history. Hundreds of times more powerful than Vesuvius at Pompeii. 36 cubic miles of rock, ash, and gas blasted into the stratosphere. The consequences were catastrophic. Sulfur dioxide mixed with water vapor to form a veil of aerosols around the globe. Sunlight dimmed. Temperatures plummeted. In North America, snow in June in Quebec. Frost in New England in August. Crops failed. People ate whatever they could find, raccoons, mackerel, nettles. Families migrated west in search of food and survival. Europe suffered even worse. Relentless rain and cold killed crops. Ireland faced a typhus epidemic, claiming 65,000 lives. In Switzerland, people ate moss and cats. Food riots erupted across Britain, France, and Germany. Yet from this gloom came a strange burst of creativity. The skies produced brilliant sunsets, inspiring the paintings of J.M.W. Turner. And in Switzerland, trapped by the relentless rain, English writers told ghost stories. Mary Shelley, inspired by the gloom and recent experiments with electricity, wrote Frankenstein. John Polidori penned The Vampire, inspiring Bram Stoker's Dracula decades later. A natural disaster had given birth to some of literature's most iconic monsters. The Year Without a Summer was a stark reminder. An event on one side of the planet can ripple across the globe, plunging humanity into famine, darkness, and even terrifyingly brilliant creativity. From dancing plagues that killed hundreds to armies fighting over a pig, history is filled with events so strange, they sound made up, but they actually happened. Join Strange Wise as we uncover 10 of the most bizarre, shocking, and mind-blowing moments in history that will leave you questioning reality itself.